Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us today. We're very glad to welcome you to our Grafana Labs technical documentation presentation entitled What's Up Docs. Note a few things about this session. The presentation is being recorded and all registrants will have access to the recording after the conference finishes. We're also going to add some live Q&A time to the end with the hosts of today. Speaking of which, our hosts today are the three of us. I'm Fiona Piers-Arteaga. I joined Grafana Labs in August of last year to lead the documentation and technical writing team. Joining me today are two members of my team, Yves Milan, who's the senior technical writer, and Jack Baldry, senior build engineer. Today, we're going to be focusing on learning about Grafana Labs technical documentation, our approach to writing docs, the challenges we're managing, the feedback channels that provide avenues to the team, and the tools and resources we're developing to support good technical documentation and writing at Grafana Labs. We developed this presentation to share how we're building a rich set of documentation to help users become successful with Grafana Labs products using our technical documentation. We'll start with reviewing the documentation approach we use at Grafana Labs. There are four key elements that inform our documentation approach. The very first and most important is technical accuracy. This prioritization supports the concept of Grafana that we don't let perfect get in the way of great. The second key element is comprehensiveness. We document all of our features and all of our products, but as a practical matter, we focus our resources on impactful technical content, identifying where gaps exist and resources are needed. We also focus on scalability, developing tooling and infrastructure to enable shared content that's common among products, especially those that share code and features. This ensures efficiency of writing resources, minimizes redundancy, and maximizes our technical accuracy. Last, we focus on inclusivity, and in this context, we are looking to develop technical content that supports multiple learning styles, those who like to read and those who like to watch video. And we also are focusing on using inclusive language. This is one of the core principles that informs our documentation approach. We like this quote very much, that readers are looking for information the way wild animals forage for food, seeking good enough information that takes the least effort to digest. This is a philosophy that is captured well in this quote, and it's written by Mark Baker, who wrote the book Every Page is Page One, Topic-Based Writing for Technical Communication on the Web. We know that readers are searching for information for a variety of reasons, to solve a problem, answer a question, or gain deeper understanding. And they use a variety of methods to find what they need. Most often they'll use search engines, but they sometimes will navigate into the content from our docs homepage. As a result, we need to ensure our users have a journey in our docs that makes sense for their information needs. So while we consider each page of content to exist separately, they do not exist in isolation. We guide our readers through our content with good information architecture. So what is information architecture? Information architecture describes an approach to technical documentation where content types are identified and labeled to use to structure the technical documentation. This approach allows us to organize our content so people can find their way through information, as well as label it for potential reuse, which then enables scaling and efficiency of resources. The reason we focus on information architecture as a primary tool for developing content is that it helps direct our writing resources to technical documentation that's impactful. By identifying user goals, we build rich content that's beyond a set of reference content. We further develop the hows and whys of our features. In addition, we can identify missing content or content that we'd like to develop in future to add to the depth of what we offer, such as best practices and tutorials. Note that information architecture is quite simple, and that's easy to lose track of in the midst of evaluating a body of technical documentation, but it is a core principle that we adopt at Grafana Labs because, as one of our investors has mentioned, simplicity scales, complexity does not. So we've developed into three basic categories. A concept, which is content to understand. This provides an overview of product features and concepts. The second category is a task, which is content to do or learn. These are typically procedures, which might also serve as best practices about how to do something. Then our third category is reference. This type of content is content to inform. It's a full reference set of content for users to understand the full set of options that are available to them. Note that we're still maturing our model, so there is a potential that other types of content may develop as time goes on. Our information architecture also supports reusability, which Jack will demo shortly. The simple idea is that once content is built and available in GitHub, it can be used in multiple locations. This has some tricky edges, but by developing technical content once and using it many, we're able to use our resources efficiently, both in writing and technical review. One caveat, though, this does require a relatively sophisticated design approach and tooling. And now Eve will take over and talk about our development process.
Our documentation team at Grafana is still relatively small, and most of us have been with Grafana for less than a year. This dynamic allows us to define our development process without having a legacy process to deprecate. It also brings a wealth of challenges that we need to solve. There are multiple points to our development approach, but the three main pillars are, number one, as Fiona mentioned earlier, the organization of content according to type, the concepts, the tasks, and the reference. Number two, when we can embed ourselves on a team during the development of a product or feature, we participate actively. This can mean being involved in the UX process, providing copy to the UI team, testing the product throughout the development process, and working with folks in customer success and support to identify user needs. Number three, publishing accurate and helpful content in collaboration with our engineers, PM, and our community of contributors. We treat our docs like code, so our documentation lives with the code base across many repositories. Grafana is also remote only, meaning the tools we use have to help us work asynchronously, but also have to help us organize our work when issues and PRs are spread out all over GitHub. Because of this, we need to use a variety of tools that address these needs. Some of us use IDEs, some of us use Emacs, some of us use the command line. For project planning, we use GitHub, ZenHub, Google Docs, among other things. We publish to the web using a static site generator, Hugo. Needing to use so many tools can be cumbersome, which is a motivation for the creation of our own new tooling that Jack will shortly demonstrate. We're currently in the process of solving the problems of content creation and content sharing across many siloed repositories, some public, others private, while also trying to keep up with our development teams. The pace of development at Grafana is rapid, so we need to make publication as seamless as possible. Through the creation of tools that Jack is demoing and will introduce shortly, we hope to facilitate easier integration with our dev teams and consistency in the publication workflow, ultimately leading to accurate and usable documentation for users.
Excellent. Thanks, Eve. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to let Jack take over for a demo.
Okay, so here I'm going to demo a couple tools today that solve those problems of working across a number of repos, over 30 in fact, and reusing content between them, and also the challenges of moving documentation around while we're restructuring to fit with the information architecture. So the first problem, working with over 30 repositories, we need a way to bring all of the content together in a single place. And that happens in the website itself. But for local development, you might want to build the website at its current form, but also with your local changes to the Grafana repo or any other repo you're working with. And for that, we've been experimenting with using Docker Compose that allows us to build the entire website by default. And that command just requires you to run Docker Compose up, and it builds the entire website with all of the content that you would see right now on the Grafana website page. But if we wanted to work with our local checkout of the Grafana repo, we have an overrides file that we can run, and that will build the entire website, but with the caveat that we're using the Grafana checkout that we have instead of the current website content. And I'll demonstrate that a little bit more while I show you how we deal with renaming files. So when we're reorganizing content to improve user experience and to fit with the new information architecture, we need to move a number of pages around, and moving pages can break links in multiple ways. Links inbound can be broken, user bookmarks to old content can break, and also any links outbound from the file can also be broken while the relative locations have moved. For that, we've developed a tool called MV Manager that takes a list of all the pages we've updated and will update the aliases, which is what Hugo uses to perform the redirects. And it will also update all of the relative references between files. So to demonstrate that briefly, I can go to the Grafana repo in here, and I'm just going to unstash some changes that rename a bunch of files. And in this change, we've renamed the developers directory to be hackers, and also renamed every reference of developers to hackers as well. Now, this has changed 66 files, with each file having numerous links out to other files and numerous links in from other files. So we will run MV Manager over this to fix all the links. There's a wrapper around MV Manager called Git rename, which will read these renames detected by Git and invoke Move Manager with all the correct renames. So if I run that, Git rename, updates a bunch of relative references across all the files. And if we go back to the Git status, we can see in the Git status that all of these references to other files have been updated as well. And we can check this on a page as well. So if I go to a page that has a link to the hackers documentation, this is a plugins page. It talks about how you could build one for yourself, and this would before point to the developers docs, but now points to the hackers docs and works as before. And the same could be seen for links outbound. So now we're in a hackers page, hackers builder plugin, and we can link out to backend plugins and any other internal links to the Grafana Enterprise and data source permissions have all been updated. So they all still continue to work. And finally, across 30 repos, it can be useful to be able to reuse content, especially when so many of the products orient themselves around Grafana itself. The instructions for how to create a dashboard or how to set up Grafana in the first instance is quite common to a number of our products. So to demonstrate that, we have the use of a Hugo shortcode that includes content from another page. This is a file for the Grafana Enterprise Metrics setup documentation, which you might want to include some information about how to install Gem in the first place, or get started with Grafana in the first place. And so here I've delimited the include with a banner just to help mark it in the file. And this include is coming from another page, which is actually in the Grafana repo. So here we're working across two repositories. And this file has the contents: install Grafana and add your first dashboard, as well as some copy. And by including this with the shortcode, we can reuse this content as many times as we want across across all of our repository boundaries, across any of our products. And this is the end result. You can see the start include banner and the end include closing banner, and the content that's included directly from another page, from another repository. And the future of this shortcode, we hope to be able to modify the headings so that you can include content in more contexts. Right now, this heading is a static size, so it wouldn't make sense for accessibility reasons in other parts of the documentation, but we'll add parameters that allow you to tune this so you can place it wherever you need in your docs. And that is the end of the demo.
So one of the things that we so appreciate about our community is receiving feedback on the documentation. And as a relatively new team, we have quite a bit of work still in front of us, but we're always very glad to hear from our community and to receive suggestions, receive notes of things that are incorrect, and especially get updates on things that you feel like you need more information about. Those will all go into our backlog and we'll triage them, but there's a variety of ways you can reach us. To go into our triage channel, you can create a GitHub issue and label it type docs. You can email us directly at docs@grafana.com. And you can also use our community channels that are regularly checked for documentation issues. Reiterating tools and resources that the team uses. We generally use an IDE. Most of us default to VS Code, but Eve has pointed out several other choices that we make. GitHub and ZenHub are our two preferred tools for project management and PR reviews. And then in the future, we do have a number of resources that we're going to be making available to our community. We have contributor guidelines that exist on GitHub, and we will be refining those to include more writing guidelines and a style guide that's far more comprehensive. In addition, as I mentioned, you can always go to our community channels and use the GitHub issues that are labeled type docs to automatically enter our triage. And last, we'd like to thank you for joining us today. I was going to say this morning, but perhaps it's not morning for some of you. And we're open to any live Q&A that you'd like to ask us. Please use the channels to go ahead and enter your questions, and Jack or Eve or I will manage them. Thanks very much, everybody.